So I got a bit of a problem here is that I've been addicted to playing Lethal Company for quite a while, and it has been a lot of fun to troll people, troll friends, and just have a great time. But to feed my addiction, I must do something artistic with that thing of addiction. So today we're going to be sculpting the Jester, or the Jester, not Gesture, Jester, the Jack in the Box from Lethal Company. And just got a fresh batch of clay. So let's get sculpting, shall we? Ooh. This Jack in the Box is going to have a pretty simple armature. Just going to cut out some wire here and then fold it in half, which these will represent the legs. Now, I know they're looking a little thin because he hasn't really eaten too much, but don't worry, we're going to bulk them right up. About maybe halfway down, we make the knees, just kind of get some pliers, pull those back, and then pull them back forward, which will create the upper thigh and then the lower leg area. And then we do the same thing for the hips, kind of creating almost like an M shape. See? Kind of looks like an M. In order to get the clay to stick, we got to get some smaller wire here. It's pretty soft. I think it's aluminum. And we just wrap all the leg with this wire going around in circles. So, the clay has something to stick to. Because if you don't do this, then the clay will slide off because it's got nothing to stick to. And then squishing down any of those sharp ends that may try and stab you later on in the sculpt. For the base, I'm just using a small piece of square wood that I got from the dollar store. Honestly, these work really great. I got a little hand drill, kind of measure out where the feet, or I should say the legs are going to go, so it stands up. And we will be super gluing this in place later on once we get the basic forms all sculpted in. Now, what I like to do before adding any of the muscles is just rolling up some clay, little noodles of clay, and placing them on the armature, kind of to represent the bones of the legs, and then putting some clay here to represent where the feet are going to be. And once all that's in place, we're going to start rolling up some tubes of clay to kind of represent where the muscles are going to be. So it's kind of like laying, each muscle in one at a time and then blending it all together to create that basic forms of the leg here. If you're just learning anatomy and you're trying to figure out how to sculpt like certain muscles, rolling them out and laying them down one at a time will not only help your sculpting ability, but it will help solidify that anatomy knowledge that you have been learning. I took a break from the leg because I wanted to figure out how I was going to do the box of this Jack in the Box character. Now, the way I went about it was a mistake, honestly. I just took a bunch of clay and added them together to try and make a box. And it did work in the end, but if I was going to do this, I would have gone a different way of doing this. I probably would have just taken a big ball of clay, squished it out, and then cut it into a square or into a box. Because what I did here, it just took so long trying to make a box and then sculpting all the edges to make sure they're perfect. It was tedious. It took too long. I wouldn't recommend doing it that way. And once we got that basic box shape, we dug out a hole, put the legs in, and covered it with clay. We kind of melted it all together with the blowtorch. And we kind of posed it a little bit to see if it would stand. Now, this thing is pretty top heavy, so later on I had to add a metal side piece to hold the structure up so that it wouldn't fall down. And since this is a box, we got to carve out where the Jack in the Box monster is going to spring out of, devour the Lethal Company crew. The box is looking like a box to me. So we're going to come back to the leg here and we're going to finish up the anatomy of not just this leg, but of both legs. Now, since the Jester, or the Jack in the Box, is pretty low poly in the game, I wanted to make the Jack in the Box a little bit more realistic. So his legs are going to be it's going to be built, because he's walking around all day, holding up that giant box on his legs. Who knows how heavy his actual head is, right? So these legs are going to be muscular. He's been not skipping a leg day. Okay, let's just say that. All right, he's going to have some sexy ass legs. And in all honesty, I was kind of jealous of how these legs turned out because mine look like, I don't know, hot dogs compared to these legs. Once the other leg is done, we do the exact same thing as we did on the other leg to the other side, laying out the muscles, refining a bit of everything, adding in the kneecap there, which, we just make a little bit of a upside down triangle. That's pretty much what a kneecap looks like anyways. And boom, look at that! Sexy legs. The next thing I want to get in place is the one arm. I thought the Jack in the Box had two arms, so I had to look into it again. But he only has one arm, which is kind of rotating the crank. He's getting cranked up. And what we did with the legs, we did the same thing to the arm. Laying out the muscles one at a time, putting in the biceps, the triceps, blending it all together, trying to make it look like an arm. And to be honest, arms are probably what I have the most trouble with. And it's just because the way the arms are shaped, it kind of confuses me a bit. But this is why I like this kind of approach to sculpting, by laying each muscle out one at a time, because yes, it helps with your anatomy, that's one, but as well as being able to get the right shapes in place. Now I'm just trying to refine the muscles, kind of where they are, and then we're going to smooth out some areas, and then we're going to hit it with the blowtorch and smooth it all out so it looks nice and neat, just like that. Now I had this idea for the arm, or for this character, because I wanted him to be a little bit different, was to add these kind of like tubes going all around the arms, and the idea was to add these tubes on the arms and the legs, and almost go for like a bionic looking Jack in the Box. But don't worry, it looked like trash, so I ended up scrapping this tube idea, but we add in some nice nasty details to the arms. Once we get the arm looking all gross, I decided to go back to the legs and work on the feet. Now I didn't want to give this dude boots because I wanted to challenge myself of sculpting feet. Now I've never sculpted a foot, and it was a learning experience. We add in the ankle bones on the sides here, smoothing it all out. We add in the toes and the knuckles. Then we add in the lines to represent the tendons of the foot. We added in also the toenails, which was extremely hard to do because it's very small sculpting, and at this point I was working the clay a lot and it got real soft, but hey, look at that foot. It looks pretty good. With the details of the legs, I wanted them to match the arm, right? Looking very organic. Now we're not going to add any tubes because at this point I thought the tubes looked really stupid, and we're going to remove them. But I wanted this to look very organic, and we're just kind of drawing lines, poking it a little bit, and then we're going to take a pretty rough sponge here and try and smooth it all out, which starts to look pretty good. And we'll also take a blowtorch as well to kind of melt down those harsh lines of the edges. A really good technique to make lines without harsh edges and to make, kind of muscles kind of pop, is take some cling wrap or some plastic and put that over your sculpt and then carve on top of it, which will make the lines not so harsh, especially if you want to go for muscle striations like I'm doing here to make the muscles really pop out. And honestly, this technique is great and it looks amazing once it's done. What we did with the left leg with the detail, we're doing the exact same thing over on the right side, as well as sculpting the toes and the foot and all that. If at this point you're still having trouble with the legs or the anatomy, I'd highly recommend that you look up some reference images of just how muscles look, or the surface details of muscles, especially of the legs, and just honestly just try your best. The more you do this, and the more you do it this way, the more you're going to understand the forms. Not just the legs, but if you're doing the arms or the chest, torso, pretty much any body part. It'll really come in handy if you have reference. I wasn't sure how the legs looked underneath the Jack in the Box in the game. So I had an idea of these legs popping out of the box, and inside the box is maybe like, the organism itself. It grew up in this box, and it got too big, and the legs pushed out of the bottom, just like that. And then, of course, it hides inside. And once the music starts going, pops out, you're like, I'm going to eat you. That's pretty much the whole idea. But we try and make everything look gross and fleshy, kind of like that, and I was pretty happy with the results. And like I said earlier, I hated these stupid wires. They're dumb. We don't talk about these wires, right? Or these tubings. I just wanted this arm to look a little bit just more fleshy instead of bionic. So we kind of separate some of the muscles with that technique we used on the legs to kind of pop those muscles out. And just kind of posing to see how it'll all look once it's fit together. Now we move on to everyone's favorite part of sculpting, the head. We roll some tinfoil out to create a ball shape, plaster all that clay around the shape, and what we're going to do is trying to make a skull shape because, you know, the head of this thing is a skull. But I didn't want to just do a basic looking skull. I want the skull to have a little bit of flair to it, right? Big jaw, sharp teeth, an interesting kind of look to it instead of just a generic looking skull, right? I feel like that's a little bit more terrifying. Once the basic shape is laid out, we take the back of our tool and make some eye sockets, round those out. We'll take some clay and add in the eyebrows, or I should say the brows section. What really helped me with making the orbits of the eyes is that I remember learning somewhere that the orbits look like aviator sunglasses. And as well as if you're having trouble with symmetry, flip it upside down and sculpt the other side upside down. It kind of tricks your brain and helps you a little bit with making things look symmetrical. For the upper part of the teeth, or where the teeth are going to be, I wanted it to kind of have like a curl to the lip or the skull, almost like a snarl. I poked a couple holes to where the teeth are going to be, rolled out some pretty small tubes of clay to make some teeth, and we lay them in there one at a time, making sure they're stuck in there and they're not going to move. We take a piece of clay and add it as the lower jaw, sculpting it in there so it's not going to move. And we want this jaw to kind of look like it's off to the side a little bit, kind of like that. And then we just start adding in the teeth one by one like we did with the upper jaw. Once the jaw is done, we're going to go back to the box and do a little bit of detailing to it. We want to cut out these strips of clay and we want to add them to the very top of the box. It's almost going to look like, reinforced edges a little bit. And it's going to have that look of a metal box that's been welded. So we heat up our metal tools and we make this kind of welding texture on the bottom and on the top as well. Adding in the sides for some reinforcement. So this box isn't just going to be like a wooden box, but it's a metal box. As well as once the sides are in place and blended in, we're going to add some rivets. So it looks like it's being held together, like this monster's in this box and it's just trapped in this thing now and it can't get out and it's just reinforced in there. So the best way to do rivets like this, roll up small little balls of clay and just push them in. And honestly, that's it. And there we go. We have a box. Now I know looking at the reference of this game character, the Jack in the Box, that skull is like on this fleshy, tentacle. I think it's a fleshy tentacle. So we are just adding in a bunch of little balls of clay here, and this is going to be where that fleshy mass kind of spews out of. That's holding the skull. So we're just heating up our tools, trying to make this look fleshy and gross. Adding in a couple little pustules there as well. Roll up some small balls of clay and let's add them together. It's going to look like some nice little small pusses. We're going to be making an armature as well out of wire that will be holding up the skull, the flesh and mass, because, the clay is heavy. You want to make sure it's reinforced. But I try to add it to the flesh mass, but it kept sagging over. So we add in a second little tendril, which is going to add some extra support to the skull because, this thing is going to be pretty top heavy and you want to make sure it has a good support system. So glob on all the clay, and there's really no right way to do this. Just try and make it look like a fleshy thing of mass, like a tentacle that's holding up a skull. And now the finished product. this was a lot of fun. He turned out pretty good, pretty happy with how he came out. This definitely challenged a bit of my anatomy knowledge, especially with the legs. The feet, actually, they look a lot better than I thought they were going to turn out. The skull, the box, I probably would have done the box a little bit differently. As you can see, I added in an extra support there so he doesn't fall over, and pretty much super glued everything down to the base so he stands up. He's definitely top heavy. As for the next sculpt, I'm not too sure what we're going to do. If you have any ideas, definitely let me know. Just leave a comment down below. And of course, if you want to see the progress of all these being created, feel free to come over to my Twitch, where we stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, sculpting and making creepy things like this. Anyways, we're all done. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.